Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Legends of the Spire. On the podcast today we've got Tony Lormor. Tony Lormor's from the northeast, a product of Wallsend Boys Club, the big famous club in the northeast that feeds Newcastle United. We spoke about his debut for Newcastle and his first goal for them as well, in which resulted in Paul Gascoigne swinging from the crossbar in very Paul Gascoigne fashion. He then had a successful spell at Lincoln, where he scored lots of goals, and we spoke about his time there and the fudge shop halfway up the hill towards the cathedral, the highlight of any trip to Lincoln, and then spoke about his time at Chesterfield, in which he's probably most famous for scoring in the 1995 playoff final against Bury, in which he says that he played rubbish in that match. But it's good speaking about that, and the FA Cup run too, in which he scored in the early rounds in that big famous FA Cup run. We then spoke quite a bit as well about his time after playing football. He's both battled with alcoholism straight after he retired, and then has battled and beaten cancer on more than one occasion now. And I will just put a quick warning on before we get on to those chats about his struggles with drink and his battles with cancer, just in case anyone's currently affected by any of those and wants a bit of a warning before it comes on. But yeah, Tony Lormor, he had one of the best goal celebrations I've ever seen. I really loved watching him score, and yeah, absolutely great to talk to. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Here is Tony Lormor. I'm always conscious, being a football fan, that I know a few players have said this, that they have, when they walk over the white line onto the pitch, you have to put on kind of a bit of a bravado or a bit of an attitude maybe to like survive on the pitch. And yet players off the pitch are completely different, aren't they, a lot of the time?
Yeah, I know, yeah. It's really strange. A few years ago, I was working for a company, and we used to work with, like, best way to put it, like, we used to go into schools and run programs, and we do it. We get the naughty kids, you see. So we'd run a program that would sort of help them. And I listened to a podcast on the way across, and it was Joey Barton. First when it first came out, and he did one with a guy who was a psychologist. And he talked about psychopaths, and it really, because you hear about players who are completely chalk and cheese playing, you see, and it talked, obviously, it was all about how you can have psychopathic traits, how you can dial them up and dial them down whenever you need them, and it was really interested. I really, really looked into that quite a lot, and you can do a test and stuff like that, and so I did a test. I tried to do it as normal as possible. And then I did one, like, my thought process of when I used to play football, and they were a million miles apart, and I was, like, on the high end of like psychopathic traits when I was a footballer, or when, training and stuff like that. So yeah, it's quite interesting, and I think what was it? It's true. A lot of people say, I think you cross that white line, and there is, a switch. And I was never. I was never a Vinnie Jones or a Justin Fashanu or something like that. It was just a mindset of winning, really.
Yeah, and there's loads of players that I've spoken to that have been like the same. They're like, actually, you wouldn't believe it, but I'm really quiet in the dressing room, and I just used to drive to training and train, and then go home again, and you as a fan, you get a completely different look of who you think a player is, because you'll see him, being a bit aggressive or flying into tackles and stuff, and then they'll walk off the pitch and they're really quiet and really shy. So shall we start at the beginning then? So you're like a product of Wallsend Boys Club, which is like the famous northeast club, isn't it, where Shearer and Beardsley and all those other great players have started. So that's where you started as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was my first. I remember being about 6-year-old. I played my first five-a-side match there. And from that, they used to, like, people would watch you play five-a-side and then say, would you like to play for the 11-a-side? So I used to play with my mates, obviously down there quite a lot. And then I just got asked if I wanted to play for the 11-a-side team. And I remember it was under nines. So what was it? So yeah, so I just remember getting into that. And I always remember the first 11-a-side match we had. We played the under 10s, and we got beat about 26-0. You know, so it was that was my first taste of 11-a-side football. But what happened was I was really lucky. At quite a young age, I was really tall. I was tall and gangly, but obviously it gave me an advantage. So at a very young age, I was scoring lots of goals, and in Newcastle, they do the schooling difference. So it's like a first school, middle school, and high school. So the middle school, I would have been about 11, and we just had a football team, which for 3 or 4 years we never lost it. We lost our very final match before we went to high school. So we had a reputation, of doing well, and obviously I was playing in a successful team, scoring lots of goals. And that just gives you confidence even at that age, So yeah, up until I didn't move to Wallsend until I was 5. So I used to live. I was born in Ashington, lived out in Northumberland, and then came into Wallsend when I was 5. So a lot of things dropped into place. Talk about people being lucky and in the right place at the right time, and even at 5, 6-year-old. We probably only went to play at the boys' club at 6-year-old just for a kickabout, And the next thing you know, you're at 12 hours involved with Newcastle, and like Wallsend obviously was a feeder club for Newcastle, and it was and things just sort of spiraled and spiraled and spiraled,
What position were you around, and where were you playing?
So this is really funny because I remember going. Obviously, I've done quite a lot of talks with a lot of young people at school. I was talking about obviously having that confidence and fear, and I always wanted to be a centre forward. My dad was a centre forward. My dad played locally, in and around Wallsend in Newcastle. So I always wanted to be involved in scoring goals. And we sat in a room with we had trials for our middle school, and we were sat in this room, and this lad went. So the PE teacher went around and said, what position do you want to play? And this lad said midfield, and nothing was said. And then this lad went, I want to play centre forward. And the teacher went, you want to score all the goals? And then I was next. And he says, where do you want to play? And I went, midfield. Because I was quite shy. I didn't want that attention, you see. And ultimately, I wanted to be a centre forward. So literally until I signed for maybe Lincoln in Chesterfield, they played me in midfield ultimately because I was just tall and fit, really, really fit. wasn't a particularly good at passing. I think I could just run around and head it and kick it. So what was it? So yeah, I was a centre forward all my life, to be honest. And I couldn't understand why nobody else would want to score goals. So.
Yeah, and then you ended up at Newcastle, didn't you? And you made your debut against, was it Spurs? You made a debut.
Oh goodness, yes. Yeah.
What do you remember about? Were they always the team that you'd supported?
Yeah. So in Newcastle, ultimately Newcastle as a young lad, there's nothing else. You know what I mean? Even nowadays, the rugby teams as well. The basketball teams had a lot of success, but you never hear about it. Everybody supports Newcastle and wants to play for them. So, like I say, at 12, I got involved with Newcastle. Because I was tall, I was playing under 14 football, and it sort of just grew from there, really. Like I say, I was very, very fit. So yeah, that game against Spurs, I'd been in and around the team for a little while. I played a couple of friendlies. The first thing was we had a friendly at Queen of the South, and I actually went up to. Well, like his skip man, carry the skips and stuff like that. And then, and I think almost I was like the last shirt given out, and it was like, chuck that on and then just join in, sort of thing. I had no idea I was going to be prepared for it. And then within about 10 minutes, the centre forward got injured. One of the lads got injured, and it was just like, go on, on you go straight away. So I had like nothing to think about. It was just like throwing in. I think I must have been still 16. And I scored within about 10 minutes, you know, and then you're just involved in it. And I was involved in it from, you know, from getting in Newcastle, obviously it's 16. So I was in and around the place a lot. I played in a couple of friendlies. We played in Monaco in a friendly as well, and I played in that. So I knew it was coming, sort of thing. So, and they were really good. They looked after me. I got thrown on literally about 2 minutes ago. They were 2-0 up. It was 2 minutes ago. I just remember the noise and the smell. And you talk about crossing that white line. You remember sitting there as a substitute, but actually physically taking that first step onto that pitch, you just all of a sudden you just got everybody looking at you. You see the whole attention's on you, and then the other players, and that was, you either sink or swim really. And I flourished, you know. I just enjoyed it. It was brilliant, you know. I think I got touched the ball twice. I gave it away both times. I got nutmegged off Chrissy Waddle, and then I fouled Ardiles, and that was like me 2 minutes of fame, you know. So, so yeah, it was just fantastic, you know, to be a 16, 17-year-old playing for your hometown club was quite amazing.
Do you find yourself like being really conscious about what you're doing in terms of like not looking at the crowd, looking around, because you must just want to, like, when you're on the pitch, just want to like have a good look around and stuff, and you're really like conscious about about just little stupid things that you might be doing while you're on the pitch?
It was weird because I'm quite shy, and I was quite shy as a kid, you know, and walking onto that pitch, we talked about earlier on about how people are different. I walked on that pitch, and that I was almost like my theatre, you know, if that makes sense. And it was, and I never felt conscious of what people thought of me and what I might be doing. It was just another game of football, to be honest. And I think it's only when you get a bit more experienced and pressure comes onto you, and you know the times like Chesterfield, some of the really important games and stuff like that. You know, I think you just want to play. You just playing football. It's fun. Do you know what I mean? It's with your mates. You know, so it's quite funny. Up until probably that semi-final for Chesterfield in the playoffs was probably the first high pressurized game I really felt I'd gone into. You see, so. And the rest of the time, I just felt I was playing with my mates and just enjoying it. Yeah,
and you had some really fun characters around Newcastle team at that time, didn't you? What was it like just training with them on day-to-day basis and stuff?
No, it was brilliant. It was really good because we had, I mean, obviously Paul Gascoigne was there, you know, and Paul was brilliant because all he ever said to me was just control the ball and just give me the ball. I don't mind who's on it. And for a young lad, all I used to do was control it and pass it to him and run in the box. And that's all I ever used to do. But then there was people like, so Glenn Roder, who unfortunately just passed away, Dave McCreary, Paul Goddard, like old players with masses of experience, but just had such high standards. Dave McCreary had just come back from the World Cup, you know, and they just set standards in training and how they held themselves in and around the club. And I learned a lot off that, really.
And your first goal, Oxford, I think it was. That was a proper goal. Just like diving header.
Elegant end.
Good celebration as well. It's just like a proper goal, that, wasn't it?
Well, it's funny because you know how things stick in your mind. I mean, but obviously the back pass gets cut out by Michael O'Neill, and then I just thought, oh, he's going to cross it, you know, because there was a lad on the post, I think, and he crossed it, and literally in my mind was, don't miss it. And I thought to myself, what's the biggest thing, surface I could have to make sure I wasn't going to miss it? So that's why I stuck my head on it, because I thought if I try and volley and I miss it, so the biggest thing I had was my head. So I just stuck my head on it, and obviously it sort of slipped and slided into the back of the net. And by the time I spun around, everybody was in the back of the net. Gaza was swinging on the crossbar and stuff like that, you know. So So yeah, and it just thinks how things go through your mind and you don't forget things, you know? Because ultimately I should have just tapped it in, but I was petrified of missing that opportunity.
Oh no, a diving header every day. And then if we go on a bit, so then you ended up at Lincoln, didn't you? Kind of eventually after a while, and you played kind of nearly as many games as you played for Chesterfield for them, didn't you? So how did you end up kind of up in Lincoln?
So when I first went to Newcastle, we had a youth team coach called John Pickering, who was brilliant, and I'd worked with John from being like 14, 15, 16-year-old. By the time we got as an apprentice, and I was full-time at Newcastle, he was first team coach, so he really helped and pushed me to get into the first team by training and stuff like that. So I had a really close relationship. Now, the times going through with Newcastle, the William McFaul was the manager who put me in, and within about 18 months he got the sack, and then Jim Smith came in, and ultimately the club got relegated. They needed to get out, or what would be the championship now. So I was never getting a game, and I got a phone call. John Pickering rang us up and just said, like, do you fancy working together again? I'm first team coach at Lincoln. And I just thought, you know, I really trusted John, and I'd really gotten well with him. And we just sat down and had a conversation. He said, let's work hard together and come down the league. We'll just play as many games as you can, and we'll just try and get you back, you know, to back up the league. So I just thought, yeah, why not? You know, at 19, I left home. I bought a house in Lincoln, you know, really sort of settled and put my roots into Lincoln. And I think it was really funny because I signed in the February for Lincoln, and I got about 9 or 10 goals. I think it was maybe 8 or 9 goals in quite a short space of time. And then, in them days, we didn't have the transfer window. And there was a big story in the back page that Bournemouth had put a bid in for me, and Harry Redknapp was the manager. And I think Lincoln paid 25 grand for me, and it was all of a sudden, it was £250,000 on the back of the Lincoln paper. So basically, I was told it was nothing, and they weren't going to sell us. And the end of the season came around, and in those days, what you do is, like, you'd play the final game on a Saturday, and then on the Monday, you'd go in, you'd have a meeting, and everybody went off on the holidays for a few weeks. So we got so on that Monday, we'd all go out for a drink. So I sat playing pool, actually, and one of the young lads came in and said, "Oh, Tony, you got to go back to the ground. John wants to speak to you." And I was like, "Oh, they're going to sell me now, you know, they're definitely going to sell it." So I get back to the ground and I meet Johnny, and he says, "Come on, we'll have a walk around the pitch." So in my mind, I'm being sold a Bournemouth here. So we get round and he's chatting away, and he says, "Look," he says, "I've been approached by Middlesbrough to go back as their first team coach," and he says, "I've got to take it." So he says, "I thought I'd just let you know I'm moving back to the North East and taking a job with Middlesbrough." And then what was it? And then from there, how things not go out of control, but like just things just changed, you know. And I just was bereft by injuries at Lincoln. I think that next pre-season, I tore my cartilage. The year after, I smashed my cheekbone. At the end of that season, obviously snapped my cruciates. And things just obviously just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. And once I had, obviously, I basically had my right knee reconstructed. And that changed everything, really. I came from being tall and rangy and quick to being like a 14-stone target man. You know, I'd lost that mobility. I should have retired, really, at that age, you know, and he was in such a bad way. But I knew nothing else, and I thought, well, I'll just continue playing football, really.
Were you quite nervous or quite worried to play after coming back from those injuries? I imagine if it's your knee, we've had quite a few players on that have had really bad knee injuries, and I always kind of think you obviously get out of rhythm of just playing every week, don't you, when you're out that long? So do you just get a bit nervous just about just doing basic runs and turns around the pitch or anything like that?
I didn't play for 16 months, and probably the last 4 months was all running and training and So I was fairly confident it was all right. The problem I had was my knee was too. I actually found out my cruciate had been put back in the wrong place. But that was like 10 years later. So my knee was really stable. It was probably too stable or too stiff to a certain extent. So the one thing I knew it wouldn't do would give way. What it would do was it just I couldn't fully bend my leg or straighten it. You see, so I was never really conscious. I was more conscious. I played with a limp for many years. So I was probably more conscious of the limp, you know, than actually giving way again.
Yeah, and did you quite enjoy the change in style of how you were playing, or did
No,
you
I hated
really?
it.
Yeah,
I hated it because I was. Do you know what I mean? I was probably 12 stone. I was quick, agile, and then you become a big lump. Do you know what I mean? And then you just get teams just smashed up here, and every game's a fight. Do you know what I mean? Because without being awful, and the position you played in, a lot of it was just balls just lumped, you know, like keeper just hoofing it downfield and stuff like that. So, what was it? So every game just became a fight, really. And you enjoyed the battle and stuff like that, and you get hardened to it. But like the actual, I mean, you brought up, you know, the Wallsend, and you brought up in Newcastle and how people play and how systems play. And what was it? Those days soon when you're playing, you know, Division 4 and Division 3 football.
yeah.
Tony Lormor got his second. A quick check on the seating. After all, he hadn't scored at all since getting 4 on the final day of last season. And with 5 minutes left, he completed his hat-trick in the softest way imaginable. Clark's cross, off Humphrey's chest, then Lormor's, and Paul Musselwhite might have nightmares all week. Lincoln 4, Scunthorpe 2.
And then you ended up at Chesterfield via a kind of a short spell at Peterborough, didn't you?
So it really, well, it was really strange. Lincoln got me fit, paid all that money to get me fit, and then released us. So I was a bit surprised at that. And then actually went on trial to Peterborough, played in a trial match for them. And they had a new manager. And out of, I don't know, 40 odd people, I was the only person they took on. And then the new manager, it was exactly what I wanted. He wanted to get a lot of people out of the club. So he was upsetting a lot of people by, we used to play two reserve games. We play like on a Tuesday and a Wednesday every week, but it was a lot of that was my people like myself who just come into the club and people he wanted rid of. So when they come in, you know, if you want rid of a senior player, you upset them and you make them train at ridiculous times. But for me, it was 2 games a week and it's everything I needed. And then I got into the team, quite surprisingly, and I played a couple of games, and then out of nowhere. I mean, I've told this story a few times. I was actually in the house in Lincoln. I was ironing, and the phone rang, and it was John Duncan, and he says, "Do you fancy coming across?" And we had a conversation. And he says, "I can't offer you any more money than you're getting at Peterborough." Peterborough was in the league above, and I just broke into the first team. So I said, "Well, there's no real point me going down the league for no extra money to sort of have to start again to establish yourself into a team, you know." And he just said, "Look," he says, "have a think about it, and you know, if it's still a no, it's no." So I said no to John first time round, and then I stood there ironing, and I thought, well, somebody that won. I always knew that at Peterborough, unless I was, you know, had this amazing run of goals, I was always going to be. When the players were fit, they'd go back in, you see. And I just thought, well, if somebody wants you, that was the first time I really thought, well, if somebody wants you, then go, you know. And if Peterborough allowed me to speak to them, then Peterborough are almost saying, you know, go and speak to them and sign for them. So I rang John back and just said, like, all right, let's have a go at it, you know, and see how we get on. And they gave me a 2-year contract, which was like an extra year before I was getting to Peterborough. And then, as we say, the rest was history. I signed Boxing Day, then we went on that terrific run, you know.
Yeah, and Lincoln's a really nice place. They've got an amazing food shop, like on the way up to the castle.
Oh yeah, you can't beat that. Yeah.
So, was it like? Did you have to leave Lincoln and uproot,
No.
or did you stay?
I stayed in Lincoln for 12 years. So all the, so I was quite lucky. So like Peterborough, Chesterfield, I used to commute. It was only an hour or so. Preston was a little bit different. I sort of rented a house in Preston and rented the house out in Lincoln, but then moved back, and then obviously Mansfield and then Hartlepool. Sort of, we sort of had a base of Lincoln, so we just stayed there and and just commuted, to be honest, because in them days, house was different. You could actually like move to town in each club you moved to, but we were settled at the time. The family was settled in Lincoln, so there was no point in changing it really.
Yeah, lovely place for a day out, isn't it? If anyone's
it's brilliant.
A day out this summer.
Oh yeah, well, funny enough, what was it, last weekend we went to the beach with the kids, so went to Skeg, so drove through Lincoln, and so yeah, there's a lot of nice memories in Lincoln. I had a really good, a good time in Lincoln.
Yeah. Okay, so back to football. Well, I was going to talk about.
But yeah, it is a good fudge shop.
Yeah, it is a good fudge shop. I want fudge now. Right, so yeah, then you come into the Chesterfield team, and like you said, went on that amazing 21-game unbeaten run. What was the dressing room like? First day going in, what were the characters like in there? Was it an easy one to settle into?
Yeah, it was fairly easy because obviously I played against Chesterfield many times. The big characters at the time, obviously Nicky Lowe, Sean Deitch. Do you know what I mean? He was really like loud. He was the life and soul of the party. But there was a lot of, Big Andy was very like calm, and Jamie was calm. So I don't know. It was really strange. Everyone talks about obviously like the run and the goals I scored, but I don't think I scored for my first 5 games. And I always remember how things happen. We played Fulham away, and I think we drew 0-0. And I came off the pitch, and I got a phone call that my daughter hadn't been very well. She was in hospital. So Laurie Madden gave me a lift home, so I could get my car and get back to Lincoln as quickly as I could. So obviously in that car we were chatting away. So I've gone like 5 games without scoring a goal and stuff like that. And I always remember the conversation. Laurie says, "So what goals do you? What's your type of goal?" And I was like thinking, "Hang on, yeah. There's a double-edged sword here, And it was really because he was a senior player, and I'm sure he had. He had a lot of, I think John probably lent on him quite a lot for a bit of advice and that. And I just thought, just how things click, and I just thought, I better get me backside into gear here, And we just had a conversation about it. And then from there, I think I probably went on a run of probably, again, 8 or 9 goals in about 10 or 15 games, So, but the dressing room was fine. It was dead friendly. It was really strange because it was like people who had been at other clubs that played like in their reserve teams. So like Robbo I think was playing for at the time at Huddersfield's reserves. Tom Curtis was at university, so he was part-time. David Moss had a job, so he'd come in between work and stuff like that. So it was quite different. At Peterborough, we used to train at Thomas Cook, had training grounds, and literally as far as you could say was football, rugby pitches, hockey pitches, immaculate. And my first training session was at Langer Lane. And I remember I stood on the halfway line, and I was higher than the goal at the bottom, And we had like a white ball and a ball with paint peeling off, and then we had this orange ball, and I was just like, you just think, God, what on earth have I landed myself in here, But the lads were brilliant, and I think, I met with Nicky Lowe just before lockdown last year, and we were saying if it wasn't for the lads, because training wasn't brilliant, we didn't have any facilities, but if it wasn't for the lads, the team would have crumbled, And when I talk about that, John and Kevin were in that, that hub, do you know what I mean? And we were just such a close knit. The training was awful, we hated it, but we were just structured, we were just well organised. And we had Kev Davies as an outlet, which we just used for probably the best part of 2 years, and nobody really cottoned on to it, so.
And 2 minutes after half-time, Tony Lormor made it 2-0 with a brilliant 25-yarder. The ball didn't touch the ground. The celebration did.
And you scored a great goal against Walsall, which is still on YouTube, and has a great celebration at the end of it. But which might be your favourite goals that kind of season during that run?
Well, obviously and there's games of importance, really. I always remember, I think we played Darlington away. I think we won 1-0 at Darlington away, and I'm sure it must have been Easter weekend, so I'm sure it was a Monday afternoon. And I think it was like a clearance. And I remember just it was just this fight ball with the centre half and goalkeeper, and the three of us came together at the edge of the box. And I just remember getting my big toe on it. And it went in, it dribbled in. Now, in the scheme of things, it's a forgettable goal, but at that time it kept us on the run. It kept us in the pack, and it was such an important game and an important goal. Obviously, the goal at Warsaw, we were chasing Warsaw to get in the third. The story behind, and this is a true story, is the Warsaw Goal. Well, in fact, funny enough, we travelled down in the morning of the game of Warsaw, and I always remember there was about 4 or 5 of us all had flu, and we were like a patched up team, to be honest. And then so the goal against Warsaw, obviously John Howard came in. I think he only came in the week before. He was playing couldn't get a game for Rotherham's reserves, and now all of a sudden he was. I think he gets the first goal. Well, he got the third goal, but my goal came in and I miscontrolled it, and it was like a muddy, bobbly pitch, and I went to control it. It went over my foot, so obviously it wrong-footed their defender, and I used to never shoot from that range, and it was just one of their moments. I just thought, I'm hitting this. I think I was frustrated by miscontrolling, and I thought I wellied it really, and then the celebration, it was dead funny because again, when you remember things, I remember sliding on my tummy, and then I remember thinking there was a concrete like edge to at the end of the pitch, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm not stopping. I just see myself heading for this concrete thing, and eventually I just stopped in time. But it was such a big game for us, really. We put everything into it. There was a little bit of needle between us and Walsall and stuff like that. So, and then that must have been like from the first game early in the season. But so yeah, that's how that goal came about.
Yeah, and then it didn't lose until Carlisle, which is kind of funny, really, because it ended up being David Reeves who kind of came when you went, and he scored the goals in that match, didn't it?
Well, it was a funny night all round, because I don't even remember, I missed a penalty. And so, yeah, obviously we knew Reeves. Carlisle were flying. I think Carlisle were top. They won the league, and Reeves, he's got a lot of goals. So, by this time, obviously we needed to win, I think. We needed to win to give us a chance going in the last game of the season to pip Walsall. And then so I got brought down for the penalty with about 10 minutes to go, and I remember falling on the ball and picking it up. Now the week before I'd scored a penalty, so I picked it up and walked to the spot, and Nicky Lowe came up to us and said, "Oh, I'll take it." And I was like, and I remember saying to him, "Oh no, I'll be fine." And I thought, well, why is the centre half wanting to take a penalty, So he just said, "All right, yeah, fine, you take it," So I remember taking it and obviously missed it, or the keeper saved it, and I went out for a corner. And even before the corner was taken, I was subbed. John took me off, and I sat next to him, and he just said saying, "You don't take penalties. You won't be taking any more penalties now." And I'm sitting there forward, and I went, "Oh, well, fair enough." And what I didn't realise was Nicky took penalties for like the last 5 years. Never missed one. I never missed one in his life. And what had happened was the week before, Nicky was injured. Nicky had been saved for that game, you see, or the Saturday before. So I never realised the penalties, and then obviously, so at the end of the game, we were devastated, really, because we knew a chance of going straight up, we'd lost. So that was a Tuesday night. We came in the Thursday, and we trained. And John sat me down and just said, like, look, Nicky takes penalties. You know, he always has done. I says, I never knew nothing about it. You know, and John says, well, look, I don't want you taking any more penalties. So I went, well, fair enough. So then Saturday comes around. We had Colchester at home. So we knew we were in the playoffs. Bit of a dead rubber to a certain extent. 3 minutes in the game, big man gets brought down for a penalty. So Nicky wasn't playing because obviously he was being saved for the Mansfield match. At the time it was the playoffs, so we thought it was going to be Mansfield. And I didn't even look at John. I just picked the ball up and thought, I've got to take it. It's sort of like redemption, you know. I mean, if I never take this penalty, then I'll worry about the rest of my life. And I ran up and just smashed as hard as I possibly could. And I even miskicked it. It goes straight in the bottom corner. It looks a great penalty. But it was actually a missed kick. And funny enough, I took penalties after that for Chesterfield, after you know, if Nicky wasn't about. And all the other clubs I played at. And that night at Carlisle was the only penalty I missed in 16 years.
Did John Duncan say anything after you'd scored that penalty or not?
At Colchester?
Yeah.
No, he never said that. He didn't substitute me. I didn't look over. I just ran back the half time, the halfway line with my back to him. I wouldn't look across. And he never said anything. And I think he was a centre forward, you know, and I think he just knows as a centre forward, you want to score goals and you want to be involved in games. I spoke even when I was a kid, you know. Mm. And he probably knew it was redemption, you know, just to clear, you know, any thoughts. Because, you know, you know, in the rest of my life, I was going to take a penalty, but, you know, so yeah, it's just something to get out of my head and stuff like that. And then obviously that leads us into the Mansfield match.
Yeah, and then losing the Carlisle game in hindsight was a good thing to do.
Well, it's funny. I say I've done a couple of talks with dinners with the club, you know, and I've sort of said, you know, missing that penalty was probably from my personal point of view, you know. I mean, because everybody, bar the FA Cup semi-final games, everyone will talk about the Wembley goal, you know, on the Wembley day, the goal against Mansfield. So yeah, from my personal point of view, it was the best ending that could have happened, really, because, you know, missing the penalty at Carlisle and then we didn't get promoted would have been, you know, I would have had egg on my face for quite a long time after that.
Yeah. And I read somewhere where you said that the playoff final game was probably the worst game you ever played.
Honestly, yeah, it was awful. I remember. So what we did was, obviously we get through, and John Duncan was meticulous in how he wanted to do things, you know. So he said, right, this is what we're going to do. We either, if we stay overnight, we stay for 2 nights, or we go down the morning of the game. And he had this theory, which I think a lot of people do now, is one night in a hotel doesn't do you any good, really. So he either said, we'll go down for a couple of days, or we'll go the morning of the match, you know. So obviously the senior players had said, we'll go down for 2 days. And then and we went the day before, we went to Wembley to have a look around, so we were in starstruck and stuff like that. So we prepped for it unbelievably well, and then we started off, and Bury were brilliant. Do you know what I mean? The first 20-25 minutes, and I couldn't get hold of the ball. Every time it came up, it kept coming back. And I remember we had a corner or a free kick, and Nicky coming up for the corner, I think it was. And he went, is there any chance you can just keep hold of the ball for 5 minutes? He says, I mean, they were peppering us. And then and I just tried, and every time it either bounced off us or I lost the header. And then obviously we got the 2 quick goals, which sort of settled us down, and I probably took the wind out of the sails of Bury. And I think if you look at chances at the end, we could have won by 4 or 5-0. So yeah, it was it was really strange to lead up to the game. I wasn't nervous. That was probably the nervous I've ever been for a match. Only because I think we had a squad of 14, maybe 16, and I think 10 of the players were out of contract. So there was a lot riding on that one game.
Yeah.
And then you've got things like playing at Wembley. You know, ultimately, it's a game you've got to win. Careers and livelihoods are on the line, you know. And I enjoyed the final whistle. I've seen something that I played probably the best part of 75, 80 minutes. And honestly, I just remember being awful, you know, and I just thought, I was just fortunate. Even the goal itself, do you know what I mean? It wasn't a great strike, but it was a half volley with my left foot. It could have gone anywhere. Robbo could have been offside, and there was lots and lots of things around it. And ultimately, the gods were looking down on me that day.
Yeah.
9 months' work depends on 90 minutes against Bury in the 3rd Division playoff final. Nicky Law. It is long. There's Morris. And here's a goal, maybe. Yes! Chesterfield score! Marvellous moment! Chesterfield take the lead from that ploy that has worked so often. Lormor gets the goal, Chesterfield arms raised in salute, and Nicky Law's throw-in leads to the breakthrough for Chesterfield. And he receives the trophy and his own personal medal from Mike Naylor, Managing Director of Ensley Insurance. Chesterfield are promoted to Division 2.
And then when you get back into the dressing room, then are you just thinking, is it just relief? You're just thinking.
Yeah, it was massive relief. And then I remember someone saying, "Oh, referees, give Robbo the first goal." And I remember going in and going straight up the referees' room and saying, making sure, you know, I'd got the first goal. Really, I remember sat outside the referee's office. I'd knocked on his door, and then we went down, obviously downstairs, and it was chaos, but a good chaos, you know, and everyone was going mad, and we had a few drinks and all that, and then what was it? And I remember Norton Lee came in, and he said, "Right, he says, I'll take you on holiday. You can go anywhere in the world." And I went, "Barbados." And he went, "Right." And 10 days later, we sat in Barbados. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was a brilliant time. You know, it was a fantastic time.
And the next season you were virtually ever present, weren't you? Season after, in like 95, 96 season, like 41 games, something like that.
Yeah, we did. What was it? We did okay. We went up and held our own, you know. And I think at that time, what would it be? League 2 and League 3, I think it was at the time. There wasn't a lot between it, you know. I think the top 2 or 3 teams spent a lot of money, and everybody else was much of a muchness, and we didn't have a big budget. I think we brought in Billy Mercer and Paul Holland, I think it was, and just to bring a bit of quality, I think, to take us to the next level. And again, we just gelled, and it was good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know.
Which players were the ones that felt that did you feel that were on your wavelength in terms of how you played? Were the players that you just felt like you had a bit of an instinctive connection with on the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, we had an incredibly simple plan. So we had so all I'd do is I'd get it and stick it in behind for Kev. Honestly, that was literally it. So yeah, I got on really well with Kev. In fact, I got on well with everybody, to be honest. There was nobody in the squad that I can't remember not getting on with. They might think differently. I seemed to get on it with everybody. What was it? We just had a team. I loved everybody. It was fantastic, you know. We just had such a work ethic. You know, I was called, we were a team of misfits, you know, really. That hadn't done well at previous clubs, and we came together and we just gelled and we just got on with it. And, you know, everybody was brilliant, you know. I couldn't single anybody out because, you know, everybody talks about, obviously, me and Robbo signing at the same time, and the goals he got and the goals I got. but I was never close to Robbo, but Robbo was never close to everybody, you know. And he sort of, he was doing a physio's degree, you know. So Thursdays and Tuesdays he'd finish training, he'd be off in Salford, you know. But it was never nasty. It was just like he had it, that was his goal. That's what he wanted to do, you know.
Yes.
I missed to share a room with Sean. He was brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Really got on with Sean's sense of humour. Really got on well with him. Daz Carr really respected Nicky for what he did and how he was doing things. A leader, a winner, you know. So yeah, there was some really, really good guys there.
That was angled away from his own defender, and Tony Lormor. Tony Lormor still going on, 2-0, and Lormor has his 7th goal of the season, and it may be good enough. Chesterfield 2 up with less than quarter of an hour to play. He's a gangling striker, Tony Lormor. Looks awkward at times, but he's done enough here to take Chesterfield through now for sure. 2-0.
And then, if we go on to the FA Cup run, you scored in one of the early rounds, didn't you? Was it Scarborough, I think?
And I think that was the game we won 2-0. So I played the first 3 rounds, and then I just started picking up a couple of injuries, really. I was injured and then came back for the Bury match, the big brawl. We finished with 9 men, and it was dead funny at the end of the game. John came in, he said, I thought I looked tired, and would I play for the reserves during the week? And I went, well, you're the gaffer. If you want me to play, I'll play, you know. But we played 20 minutes with 9 men, you know. So I played, it was dead funny, I played against Doncaster reserves, and I scored 2 goals in the first 20, 30 minutes. Absolutely flying, you know, you're full of confidence. And then and I went in for a challenge and jumped over the tackle, and as I landed, my ankle went underneath us, and the pain was horrific. But so I'd obviously done the ligaments in my ankle, and then you see, I think the Forest game was coming up, I think, you know, and I was like, I can't remember what it was now. I was sub for Forest. But whatever it was, I just knew that, you know, I was going to be out for a while. And I remember seeing a surgeon, and he basically said you would have been better breaking your ankle than actually doing what he did to your ligaments, you know. So I knew it was pretty bad and stuff like that. And then I was dipping in and out of the team, and I remember training. We trained in Manchester. I think we trained at Man U's old training ground before the semi-final. And I remember limping, and I thought, well, I may get stuck on the bench, you know. And John named the team and the subs the day before, and I wasn't in them. And he was really good and gracious. He came over and had a chat with us. And John made some decisions which you looked at and would think, why has he done that, you know? But they always worked, you know.
Yeah. And
he says to us, he says, look, I'm putting Daz Carr on the bench. He said, if it gets late on, I can chuck Daz on up front. He's more aggressive than you. And that's the reason, only reason, and obviously you're not fully fit. So I know I was gutted, but obviously I could understand it.
Was it an enjoyable game to watch?
Oh, I loved every minute of it. As a fan, as a football fan, what John did really well. The disappointment of not being substitute the day before, you got that out of your system. So you woke up, and we're a team, you know what I mean? We're a squad. You do things together. And I looked at my moment was Wembley. Do you know what I mean? That was my moment, you know. And it was somebody else's turn, you know, and I just thought, well, be a man, be gracious, you know what I mean? The team. And I just remember celebrating every goal. And when Sean scored the penalty, I remember looking at the scoreboard, and we were, you know, you just looking, you think, yeah, we're 2-0 in the semi-final of the FA Cup, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fantastic experience. I mean, on the bus to the ground, you know, seeing people on the streets, and and then getting into Old Trafford and it being best part of full, and Chesterfield having half the ground. It was just the noise, you know what I mean? As I remember walking down the touchline, I was almost in tears. It was brilliant, you know, the whole atmosphere was fantastic.
Yeah, and when you're like not in the team or on the bench, do you are you still like part of it in the dressing room, or do you kind of pull yourself back a bit? And
yeah, I think everybody gets in there at the beginning, and then there comes a time when people start to get changed, and then obviously you would go out for a warm up about 40 minutes for the game. So from my point of view, you know, I mean, once the team talks and once people start getting changed, you get out. You know, I mean, you let the lads do their bit really. So yeah, I can't remember where I was. I probably just lingered around, probably for an hour before kickoff, savoured the atmosphere, the noise, made sure I had a place to sit in the dugout. There was a few of us. So yeah, and things like, I mean, we played Middlesbrough, you know, who were, you know, what was the Premier League team at the time, and I remember people like Brian Robson and you know, who was one of the heroes of me growing up. You know, I mean, so you're looking for glimpses of people in who's there and stuff like that. So he just sort of took everything in.
Yeah. And then it was the season after that you left, wasn't it? And a lot of players left at that time anyway, because they got moves elsewhere and things on the back of the cup run. But then it was you handed in a transfer request, didn't you? Right.
Yeah. So I knew you could. There was bits and bobs where you just thought, yeah, I'm being phased out. And one of the things was, I remember, so like I said, I used to play midfield now and then. And then we had a game at York, and he played me right-hand side of midfield. And I just remember thinking, why is this, you know? And we'd had discussions about why he wasn't playing up front, and I could understand why that was. And then I just felt my time was up. Do you know what I mean? And I thought there was. I just thought it was time for a change. Do you know what I mean? And I just felt if I put transfer, I knew nothing about the Preston thing. I just thought fancied a change, and if I put it out there, I wanted to love somebody might come in, you know. And that was, I never had an agent. Do you know what I mean? I did everything myself. I just thought, oh, well, let's try and see, you know. And I think there was probably a bit of a hangover after the cup run, you know. There was people who, and I was probably one of them who felt their nose was pushed out a little bit. But I just felt it was time for a change, you know, and I was never going to be a right winger. So I just thought, well, let's see what happens, you know. And again, I think we played Preston a couple of weeks before, and I think I scored up there, and I played really well at home against them. And then the next thing, I got a phone call, and it was like, fancy coming up and this, that, and the other. And I thought, well, yeah, you know. And obviously the thing with Reevesy, it worked out well, where they wanted shot of Reevesy, and probably John fancied. I know obviously Reevesy was high on John's list, and it fitted us both having probably a change. And but going to Preston I thought was going to be everything, because they were always known as a big club, and then you get there and it just fell flat on its face. You know what I mean? I could have really. I think the first 2 weeks was good. The euphoria of main debut, I scored a couple of goals at Southend, and then after that, it was just a massive downhill experience, you know. And I never settled in the city or the town. What was it? It was really strange. There was a massive divide in the club. Half the team lived in Manchester, half the other team lived in Preston, and they didn't really get on. And so yeah, and then sort of the manager that signed me, he got the sack. But David Moyes was like a coach and a player. and there was lots going on. It was really strange. The manager accused David of getting him the sack, and we played at Grimsby once, and there was a massive fight in the tunnel, and it was all the players, the manager, the coaching staff. It was all Preston players and staff fighting with each other. Usually it's with the opposition, and it was just like everything just built up and it just went bang.
Yeah, and then I suppose you kind of went to a few clubs, didn't you? Probably Mansfield was probably where you had your most games, was it, after Chesterfield?
Yeah, it was, yeah. And it was weird because I bumped into their manager, might have been at a game, and he said something about, would you fancy coming down and this, that, and other? And he was like, we can't afford your wages, but we can afford this, that, and other. And we still had the house in Lincoln, and I said, well, I can afford to move back, and I just said, if you want, I'll come back and play, sort of thing. And that's how that happened, really. Mm. So I had 2 full seasons at Mansfield, and then the third pre-season, we had our final pre-season match at Notts County. So I drove back from Notts County's ground to where I lived in Lincoln, and I got back to Lincoln, and my wife at the time, she said, Billy Dearden's rang, can you ring him back? And I says, yeah, I'll give him a ring. And so I rang him up in a conversation, and he went, just like, chairman sold you. And I went, all right. He says, Hartlepool put a bid in, so he's accepted it. So this was like Saturday night. And then, so Hartlepool rang us and just said, like, do you want to come up for Sunday night? We'll have a meeting Monday morning and see what you want to do. And that's how football worked, or how football worked in them days, so... So I played for Mansfield on the Saturday afternoon, Monday morning. I signed for Hartlepool. So,
because it's just like I think anyone in any other business, if another identical business to yours just said, "All right, you're working in Swansea now,"
yeah,
you'd just be like, "What? I'm not. I've got a house and I've got a family and everything else." But football is one weird business, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah, I've said this loads of times. Must be the only business where there's no logic. Do you know what I mean? It's just fly by the seat of your pants. Back then it was. It was. It's probably not much better now if you look at some of the clubs. But yeah, it's a business without a business plan. It's a business with successful business people who don't apply what they were applying to their own business into a football club. Yeah. I'm a Newcastle fan, you know what I mean? And you look at like how Newcastle's run by a billionaire, you know what I mean? It's bonkers. Do you know what I mean? There's no logic to anything really.
Hi everyone, producer Dave here. I just wanted to put in a quick warning here as now we go on to the part where Tony talks about his battles with alcoholism and also fighting cancer as well. So if those are issues that affect you, then I just wanted to put in that quick warning now. Thanks.
And one thing that's come up quite often as well, speaking to players, is that transition out of being a footballer to after you're not a footballer anymore. We had Paul Hall on who said that he could only describe it as coming out of prison after 20 years, and suddenly you've like got no skills and you've got no job, and you just don't know what to do next, and you're still quite young as well. And we've had other players that have had really bad injuries that have had to kind of rehabilitate themselves to some degree. And you kind of had struggles as well, didn't you? Kind of finish playing.
Yeah, it was massive really, because I signed for Hartlepool at the beginning of the season, and I knew obviously I was on borrowed time with my knee. In every club I was at, I never had a medical because I would have failed it through my knee, and every club sort of knew that. So I started with Hartlepool, big in the season, and by the end of October I was in hospital with my knee, and I knew my knee was literally crumbling away. So I couldn't train and I couldn't play. I couldn't do the two things. So I could only train certain days. If we played on a Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, I wouldn't train. You know what I mean? So I knew my career was coming to an end then. And when I was in Hartlepool, I turned alcohol really. You know what I mean? I was living in a guest house. I was commuting from Lincoln to Hartlepool. And yeah, so I just dived into a paint pot really, and really like when that day, you know, when that day finally comes, you know, was horrific, you know. And then I signed for Telford, and my heart wasn't in it. And then I played locally, and you know, I was a mess really. Do you know what I mean? Overweight, unfit, you know, I mean, a drunk. It was just a really tough time, you know. And I ended up, you know, people to a certain extent take pity on you. And this, don't know how it came about. I met a guy who was a football fan in Nottingham, and he sort of said, I run a window company. Do you want to sell some windows for us? And I went, yeah, I'll do that. And became a double glazing salesman for 2 or 3 years. And then ultimately went from sales job to sales job. And my dad was in sales, and he was like, you know, you can earn some good money in that. But the only time I really felt settled was I got the commercial manager's job at Mansfield. And I was going along okay. I enjoyed it. It was something I really did enjoy. And then the club got relegated to Football League, so we all got made, you know, we all got sacked really. And then I went across and worked for Derby County, and they'd just been taken over by an American consortium. And how they did things, I just absolutely loved. And all I was doing was selling tickets, and I was selling tickets to the young football teams, and it was brilliant, to be honest. Absolutely loved it. Did it for a year or one season, and then we came into the second season flying along. I'd been there about 18 months, was doing really well, and then I got a phone call, and it was my mum, and she said that she'd been diagnosed with cancer, and that just flipped my world upside down again, and it was back to the drink, and I got to the point where Derby got me in and just said, like, you know, we're gonna have to let you go. So, you know, we'll give you your notice, and we'll give you a reference, but we can't have you here anymore. And that was sort of the next lot of, you know, me spiraled out of control, to be honest. So yeah, so for a very, very long time, I was from football finishing until I talk about. I did an interview once saying getting diagnosed with cancer was the best thing that could ever happen to us, because it gave me a kick on the backside and it gave me a focus. And that was when I was kit man at Chesterfield, you know. So up until I joined Chesterfield, I'd been living in Nottingham, I was living in Newcastle, you know, and I was still just in the best part of a functioning alcoholic, you know. And then when my mum passed away, that was just that the drinking just went to another level, really. And how it all happens is I spewed the line in my stomach up. Do you know what I mean? I got that bad. I remember we stood in the shower and just blood everywhere. And I just thought, I've got to change. Do you know what I mean? I've got to make a change or I'll die. This will kill me, you know. And from that, I sat down and knew what I had to do. I was on antidepressants and all sorts. So I just said, right, I've got to stop this. I've got to change my life. What, you know, I had children that lived in Lincoln and Derby, and I was living in Newcastle. So I was like, right, let's move back. Who do I know? How can I get a job back in that area? Chris Turner was my manager at Hartlepool. I rang him up and just said, like, have you got any jobs? You know, and he rang me back and he said, do you fancy being kit man? And I went, yeah, let's do it, you know. He says, oh, you got to meet Paul. Paul's just came in. And then, now the funny thing was, when I was 17 or 18, when I was at Newcastle, I went on loan to Norwich and played in the reserves for whatever reason. I have no idea why I went on loan to Norwich. But Paul was the centre midfield player for Norwich reserves. And obviously he was in that first team. And I got on really well with him. And that was the next time I met him, really, after leaving Norwich, was like a sort of interview stroke chat about becoming kit man. And it was a fantastic 12 months. You know what I mean? I loved everything he did. How he set up training and the team and the club was just brilliant. Completely different from how everybody else was doing it.
I was talking to another Chesterfield fan the other day, and we were saying how it's amazing when you get a manager that doesn't just pick a team up, but they pick a whole staff of a club up from, your office staff to your stewards to your fans. When you get the right man in, it kind of picks everyone up, doesn't it? And Cook was a perfect example of that.
Yeah, honestly, he was. He involved everybody. I remember we used to have team meetings on a Monday morning, and all staff would be in it. And I always remember we played Mansfield in what's now the AFL Trophy, and we had Mansfield away, and we had a meeting just before we went. And he said he was like, he didn't know whether to play. Hurdy right back or in centre half. Do you know what I mean? And then there was another lad. He was like, "Who's the centre half?" He said, "I wasn't sure what to do." He asked me opinion. Do you know what I mean? And he says, "What do you think? What do you think?" And I said, "Well, what about it?" No, he didn't listen to it. He did, but he had that. Do you know what I mean? He involved everybody in the decisions, and he gave everybody a voice. And I know you go on about it. Paul had one or two things, off the field, which didn't help. But I mean, as around football in the club, he was just brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely brilliant. And that 12 months was probably the most enjoyable job I've had. And I mean, when I said I would take the job, I was on 12 grand a year. I was probably, what was that, about in my early 40s, and I was on 12 grand a year. And it was just what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I just needed something to do. I used to go in for 7 o'clock in the morning, and I would leave at 5, 6 o'clock at night. So I could just focus on that job, and even it was really strange because even in the early parts of that, like the pre-season stuff, I was still drinking ridiculous, and it wasn't until I found that lump, like in the August, I found a lump on my neck, and that sort of just changed everything, And it was from the August, I finally got diagnosed in the December, and that just sort of changed everything. Do you know what I mean? I never realised how serious it was or could have been. You see.
Yeah, and you've been really brilliant and really honest in like the blogs that you've done and the interviews that you've done before, because you've had you've kind of beaten cancer a few times, haven't you?
Yeah.
And it's, 4 times now, is it?
I've lost count now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, can you like articulate your thoughts of what it was like that first time that you were diagnosed?
Yeah, I had no symptoms. I hadn't been ill. I had a lump on my neck. Even through the process of like everything I went through, the biopsies. I had the biopsy, and they said you'll get a phone call in 2 weeks to get your results. 4 weeks later, I still hadn't heard anything. So just like, oh well, I'll just get on with stuff. And not long after that, I got a phone call. Actually went up with my training kit. That's how blasé I was about it. And walked in the room, and he just went, "You've got cancer." So I just thought, obviously I lost my mum. And I think that when anybody's diagnosed with that, what I found out is the first thing you think of is like, when am I going to die? You know what I mean? How long is it going to take me to die? And I was no different. That was the first thing that went through my head. I remember coming outside. I tried to ring my dad. I couldn't get hold of my dad, so I rang my brother. And I cried down the phone to my brother. And I just thought, right, my whole life had all been about plans and goals and stuff like that. And that's probably, like from the footballing days. You mentioned something about, I think it was Paul Hall, about being in prison. I used to say it was like being in the army. We were very, very just regimented, told what to do, where to go, how to do it. Tomorrow you'll do exactly the same. You'll do what I tell you to do. And that was, and I remember thinking, I need a plan, and I need to know what's happening, because I need to beat it. Do you know what I mean? I turned it into a big challenge. And I just thought, it's not going to be this. I didn't Google anything about lymphoma or nothing. I just sort of went, just put my hands into my hands into the experts, and sort of went, just get on with it, really.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, you know what I mean? And go for radiotherapy. So I went for radiotherapy, and you just go, it went quite quickly, you know? And it was like, right, I've done it, I've beat it, you know? And I was clear for 4 years. Now, if you get a 5 years, that's like, you can say you've never had cancer, you see. So I got a 4 years, and obviously then it came back. So it was, and every time really, it just seemed as a bit of a challenge. I had it in my mouth. I had another lump on my neck. When it comes back, they do a thing called wait and see. You know what I mean? So you just wait. And I always remember the consultant. She just said, it's the size of a pea at the minute. If it gets the size of a satsuma, then we need to do something about it. And it was over the Christmas and the New Year. And I remember waking up, and it was just getting bigger. You know. So they gave me another load of radiotherapy that got rid of it. I was told I was given the all clear, and then it just came back massive, really. And that was when it came back like huge in my neck, and it came back in my stomach as well. And I was in a lot of pain with that. It was painful in my stomach. I wasn't eating, and I was, passing blood and stuff like that. So I knew something wasn't right. And then, the staff at the Chesterfield Hospital, I just kind of thank enough, the consultant. What happened was, the consultant seen me on a Thursday, and he basically said, we're going to start chemo on Monday. I have no results of what you got, but I'm that concerned. I want to start chemo on Monday. And if he hadn't have done that and waited for results, I definitely wouldn't have made it. And it was just things like that, the people on the ward were brilliant. I always talk about the nurses on Hasland ward, and the ladies and nurses in the hematology department. I still keep in touch with them today. I'm still back every 8 weeks to see them, but it was just a massive, I wouldn't say worrying time. I was never worried until I had to go to Sheffield. And once I went to Sheffield, Hallamshire, and they said he needed a stem cell transplant, that was the first time I sort of went, I'm in the clots now. This is not a really good place. And ultimately, I spent 4 or 5 months in hospital at Chesterfield, and I had lots of chemo, but none of it could keep it under control. And it was very much, when I went to Sheffield, it was like, oh God, this is quite serious now. So, and it was quite funny. I was speaking to a nurse the other day. I went in for my 8-week jab, and we're talking about stem cell transplants. Stem cell transplant was the only side effects I ever had of all my treatment. And she said yes. She says a stem cell transplant takes everything and then takes more. And that was, I had 14 days in isolation in Sheffield, and that broke me, to be honest. I'd given up halfway through that. I was quite happy to throw in the towel, and but I've been told I'm stubborn, and I love a challenge. And a lot of footballers will always be, if someone tells you can't do it, you'll prove them wrong. And I think that's the attitude I took, And I did an interview once when I said, I wasn't scared of dying. And I think the biggest thing I did was I just sort of released everything. I didn't fight it. I just sort of went, I'd say, I've had a good innings, and if it ends, it ends, but, let's, get on with it and see what path it leads to,
Yeah. Well, and you can see from, when you were talking about taking that penalty after being told not to take them again, there's kind of an attitude and a stubbornness there that you can see in your writing and your blogs and your interviews that you've done recently. And how do you kind of keep positive or keep going when you keep getting setbacks and things like that? Was there Was there a way or a method that you had in just keeping positive?
Don't know if it was weird. I've got I played with a guy called Graham Lee, and his wife was told she had 12 months to live with a brain tumour, and she asked me the same question, and I gave her an answer which I don't know whether you may have to bleep it out, but I just went, don't give a shit. Do you know what I mean? And I mean that in the right way. It was, and that's when I said, sort of like, I stopped fighting it, but allowed the process to, I fought to, to do everything I was asked of us, but I didn't fight the system or the process, you know what I mean? If I was told I had to go here, I have to do it, I'd do it, do you know what I mean? And sort of I'm not spiritual at all, you know what I mean? But I just thought, well, you put your hands in somebody, and I put a blog out there, and I put things happen for a reason, and I believe that, and I came really close to not being here, and then you just cherish every day. Do you know what I mean? And when I got the all clear, it's weird, and I'm in this bubble, fighting or going through what I'm going through, and you don't really realise what's going on around you, and then all of a sudden you get to go clear, and then you just look at the collateral damage around you, and I mean that, like, with Mel, my partner, my kids, do you know what I mean, friends and family, what they've been through, and you do it for them, you do it for your love of it, I do it for the love of Mel and of my kids, and my friends and my family, and I have an opportunity to do something with my life, that's why I started Briteside, I found there was a gap in the market where I felt there wasn't support to a certain extent, and that I set that up. I was at home like for 3 months, and I felt I didn't have anyone to reach out to talk about cancer, and that was the only reason I really set Briteside up, was just to say, if you're sat at home and you're quite not sure, and who to talk to or where to go or what support group, I thought, well, I tried to make it as easy as possible for someone to get in touch with us, and that was, and that's why I set it up. You can text me, you can get to the helpline, you can email me, and that's where that all grew from, and this is not to make money, do you know what I mean? This is not to try and scam people out of, the hard earned. This is something I just want to help, and that's where it grew from, to be honest. I just felt I was given an opportunity to do something, and I want to do something with my life, really.
Yeah, and tell us what the website is.
So it's Briteside.org. So it's BRITESIDE.CIC.org. And there's obviously this stuff on there. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group. I'm on Twitter. It was really funny. I launched it, and then I had a message about 10 o'clock at night by a guy who basically, it was 10 o'clock at night, he sent me a message to Facebook and just said, I start treatment next week. I'm terrified, I'm terrified. You got any tips? We had a conversation. We still in touch today, he's going through, his treatment, and that's what I wanted it to be, there's somebody else who has gone through something similar, a diagnosis, then had to wait 4 weeks to find out the results. And those 4 weeks, they'll kill you as much as the treatment, the worry, of what might happen, what could happen, and this, that, and other. So yeah, I just thought, well, if I could help, and it was a bit like the blog, really. If I could help one person, then it was worthwhile, and that's why it was all set up, to be honest.
Yeah, and there's two sides of it, really, isn't there? Because most people know someone that's had cancer, and there's as much as of the people that the family or the friends that are around, and how how do you act or stuff, and it's I don't know, from your position of obviously being diagnosed before, and it's obviously different for different people, but is there a way that you'd like people to kind of treat you or act towards you?
Talk about it honestly, and it's really strange to say about, and I know everybody's different, because some people like bury the head in the sand, but you just don't want to talk about it, and we did some support groups before lockdown through the hospital at Chesterfield, and you could say there was a mix of people, people just terrified, some people, there was a lady there who was terminally ill, life and soul of the meetings, what I mean? From my point of view, I think just talking about it, I think because I mean that it's the elephant in the room. Do you know what I mean? When you get diagnosed, and it's it helps. Do you know what I mean? And I think just say it, ask, how you are. Do you know what I mean? What's your hopes and fears? You know what I mean? What issues do you have around it? What's your thoughts and feelings about it? And have a conversation about it. Because it's difficult to bury your head in the sand, what I mean? Like from being like told you've got cancer, and then 4 weeks later, this is what we're going to do. That 3 or 4 weeks in between I've mentioned is horrific, and talking about it, is probably the easiest thing to do.
And then I read somewhere that you've got a Great North Run now. You've said it now. And I've done the Great North Run before, and it was really good fun actually, because I timed it perfectly for when the red arrows fly over the time bridge.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
So it's just at the start of the bridge as they flew over, so I was running at the perfect pace for it. But, so is that still
than me.
Is that still on the agenda?
Yeah, definitely. I've committed to doing it, and I'll do it. What I have found was, my training. So I really struggle with my lung capacity, So, I've walked quite a lot in lockdown, but it's I'm hoping that when the gyms come past, I can slowly build that back up. I have to say it looks a massive challenge at the minute, but if you look at the past, then I've had massive challenges and got through it, but as I am, I don't want to compete in the Great North Run. I want to train to win it. Do you know what I mean? That's sort of the mentality you have. If you're going to do something, ultimately completing the course will be a fantastic achievement. But in my mind now, I'm training to win the Great North Run, and that's the mentality. And it's the old adage of I may get this wrong, but it was he shoots for the stars and all that, and you don't quite get there. If I shoot for mediocrity, then it'll be a drag. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to get under 2 hours at the minute. I can't drive the car 13 miles under 2 hours at the minute. So yeah, but that's a challenge, and why not? And that's a big thing at the minute. So we'll see.
Well, I'll look forward to Steve Cram commentating on you and Mo Farah head to head down that finishing straight.
He'd be like, who's the fat bloke next to Mo Farah?